All right, let's continue on. So, in the previous video, we discussed Weston A. Price's journey all around the world studying health and what practices led to the health of these so-called primitive people that were disconnected from civilization. All right, so what did they learn from it? Let's dive into it. There's 11 principles to healthy nutrition. Okay, here's where we get started. The first principle: no refined or denatured foods. The first characteristic of healthy traditional diets was that they contained no refined or denatured components. The list of such man-made items coming into the outpost during Dr. Price's day was actually a relatively short list, but led to huge consequences. That's refined sugars, white flours, vegetable oils, canned fruits, and canned vegetables, canned condensed milks. That's about it. Unfortunately, the list today is considerably longer. Not only does our diet contain much refined sugar, but also has high fructose corn syrup and its evil twin, agave syrup, which animal studies have shown to be worse than sugar. We'll look into this in more detail later. Now, we also have the processing of grains, mostly wheat, into white flour, which removes most of the vitamins and minerals. White flour is the basis of the modern American diet. It's, it's a huge part of it, providing a large portion of our calories. Then we went ahead and started pasteurizing dairy. So we have pasteurized and reduced fat milks. Those are not whole foods. They are foods whose vital nutrients have been damaged, we'll talk about that later, or removed completely. We also have refined vegetable oils, and even worse, hydrogenated fats that are completely new to the human diet and one of the chief causes of our health problems today. Yet, most spokesmen from the various health establishments are going to tell us that they are better for us than animal fats, which is a total deception. We also have isolated protein powders, again, not whole foods, but proteins separated from the components of our bodies that need to be proteins separated from the components of our bodies need to assimilate them, and also denatured by high temperature processing. We will learn later just why the consumption of protein in isolation from animal fat is so dangerous. It's a huge problem. Finally, there are 2,000, way more than that today, thousands of additives in our food today. If we decide that we needed just a few of these additives, say 4 or 5, our food preservation, and if the diet were otherwise good, these additives maybe wouldn't be such a problem, but they're literally in the thousands. When you feed many of these different additives together, this toxic soup, to animals like rats, even though the additives are all in the safe dose range, you get dead rats. That's the effect of these additives that are in our food today. So gross. Here are many examples of modern processed foods. The most famous quote from Dr. Price is, "Life in its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed." Now, I can say without reservation, you cannot live life to the fullest eating these kinds of processed foods. They do not support good health, nor even a positive mental outlook. Most scientists today, in Dr. Price's day, believe that we can outsmart Mother Nature. And that's the whole goal of everybody in science, is to outsmart Mother Nature and control it. And we do not need to learn, we do not need to learn or obey the laws of nature. But Dr. Price was different. He knew that there were no mistakes in nature, only wisdom that man needed to honor. And I say that like a broken record. Honor your body. Honor your divine design. Naturally. Okay, so avoid all that refined garbage. Second principle. Every diet contained animal products. Every one of them. And the ones that had the highest health, as you remember, had a solid combination of both. Okay, animal and plant foods. But they always had animal foods. So this was Dr. Price's greatest disappointment. He hoped to find a healthy population living entirely on plant foods, but he didn't find a single one. What he did find was that primitive peoples expended a great deal of energy and went to considerable risk to obtain the animal foods. The most important animal food, according to Dr. Price, was fish and shellfish, including the organs and roe. In his studies, he not only looked at living facial structure, but always asked to see skulls. And he used calipers to measure the thickness of the skull. And he found that the population that had access to fish from the sea had the thickest skulls. And it's a good thing to have a thick skull. But traditional people used many other animal foods, including different types of birds, red meat, with the fat and organ meats preferred, raw milk and milk products, eggs, and reptiles, and many cultures that looked at valued insects. In some cultures, insects were the only animal foods that they were able to consume. All right, there are certain nutrients that are found only in animal products. First and foremost, vitamin A and D are found only in animal fats. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Cholesterol is actually a nutrient, especially for the growing child. You cannot make enough cholesterol to ensure the optimal development of the nervous system and the gut. Now, mother's milk is very rich in cholesterol and contains an enzyme that helps the baby absorb all of that cholesterol. For humans, dietary cholesterol is important right through the growing years. Adults can make all the cholesterol they need, but nevertheless, the cholesterol we consume is important for the health of the intestinal tract. These cells there are very rich in cholesterol and can actually directly take up the cholesterol that we consume in our food. So embrace that. Usable vitamin B12 is only found in animal products. Other important dietary components found only in animal foods are the long-chain, very unsaturated fatty acids called arachidonic acid, or as well as EPA and DHA. These are all acids, okay? Arachidonic acid, eicosapentaenoic acid, and docosahexaenoic acid. All right, AA, EPA, DHA. Got it? Later we will learn how important these substances are for the brain and our entire nervous system. Then there are many nutrients that are present in plant foods, but which are more easily absorbed from animal foods. For example, many plant foods contain calcium, and vegetarians insist that you can get all the calcium you need from plant foods. But the calcium from plant food is bound up. The technical term is chelated in the food, bound up in the food, and is not very bioavailable. Your body has to work really hard using many enzymes and vitamins to get that calcium. So you're actually becoming quite nutrient deficient to capture that calcium from the plants. The only two good sources of calcium in human diets are dairy products and bones. In cultures where they do not have dairy products, they use bones. They either grind the bones of birds and animals into a powder to add to food, or they make bone broth. Consider the Asians who do not have the dairy products. In the typical Asian diet, they have a bone broth with every meal. The Eskimos got calcium from their fermented fish bones. Now, zinc is another nutrient that is very difficult to get in adequate amounts from plant foods. Iron, B6, magnesium, copper are all also difficult to absorb from the plant foods. And copper is very important for the cardiovascular system. And the best source of copper, you guessed it, liver. Okay, usable B12 is found only in animal products. There is a compound that looks like B12 in certain plant foods, but is actually an analog that blocks the absorption of true B12. For example, soy foods contain something that looks like B12, but which actually increases the body's need for B12 because it blocks the absorption of true B12. So important is vitamin B12 that your body stores a supply that can last up to 10 years. And some people use B12 very efficiently, while others use it up quite quickly. This is why some people can go longer on a vegan diet than others without initially noticing the development of serious health problems. We associate B12 deficiency with serious diseases like multiple sclerosis, cancer, heart disease, and anemia, but actually, the early signs of deficiency tend to be psychological, nervous disorders such as fatigue, tingling of the hands and feet, sleep disorders, and tendency to be irritable and anger, okay, which is so common. So somebody who is always flying off the handle may be lacking B12, a condition I frequently encounter in vegans, and most of the people in our mental institutions are very deficient in B12. Okay, even the true B12 is difficult to assimilate because it's a very large molecule that is absorbed by attaching to a protein called the intrinsic factor. The intrinsic factor is secreted by the same cells in the stomach that secrete hydrochloric acid. Thus, although B12 deficiency is common in vegetarians, it can also occur in those who eat meat if they have difficulty producing hydrochloric acid, a condition that frequently occurs in the elderly. So it's difficult to utilize vitamin B12 from pasteurized dairy products. That's pretty much everything on the shelf today. And very few states, more and more states are getting there, but it's hard to get your hands on raw dairy. So if you're a vegetarian, depending on milk products for most of your animal foods, it's very important to have raw milk and raw cheese. So I would never tell anyone they have to eat meat if they did not believe in eating meat. I'm not here to convince you you have to go eat a steak every day. This is not what our diet is about. Rather, it's about a judicious selection of high-quality animal foods, and if you're a vegetarian, you'll also need very high-quality raw dairy products in your diet, along with high-quality eggs, pasture-raised, okay? Compulsory pasteurization laws actually take away the religious rights of vegetarians and of anybody who believes that they should only put pure foods into our body. Pasteurized dairy is not a pure food, okay? Now, this woman comes from a tribe in Africa whose only foods are fermented goat milk and some insects. Now, the combination supplies all the nutrients the body needs. In the Western diet, the combination of raw milk from pastured animals and eggs from pastured animals also provides the gamut of nutrients. Eggs contain the same kind of vitamins and special fatty acids that occur in insects. So if you are a vegetarian, you may be able to be healthy consuming raw milk and eggs as long as they are of excellent quality. Quality of your food is so important. Be sure to source quality. Put that investment there. Now, she says may because if your ancestors come from seacoast regions, you will probably also need seafood in your diet to be healthy. And some people have very high requirements for zinc and iron, and so need to include red meat in their diets. But there is no particular health reason to exclude meat and other animal foods from your diet. Raised and prepared properly, and that's key, raised and prepared properly, these are healthy foods that supply important components to the diet. The illustration provided by the beef industry shows the modern products that require compounds derived from cows, not only meat, but also plastics, modern building materials, hydraulic brake fluid for airplanes, products that go into tires, cosmetics, household cleaners, and even crayons. Many of the organ meats are used to make pharmaceuticals. For example, the adrenal glands are used to make epinephrine, and a part of the spinal cord is used to make chondroitin sulfate. So why not just eat beef, including the various organs which can be used in sausage? Okay, so even strict vegans can escape dependence on the products of slaughtered animals. We as humans have always been dependent on the products of slaughtered animals, more so in the past than today. When we need to kill an animal to get the hides, the furs for warmth, the bones for tools, and tendons for thread, human souls living in physical bodies have always depended on animal products. That's a fact of life. Now, it's important to understand the origins of today's the origins of today's plant-based, low-fat, high-fiber diet. The American Vegetarian Society was funded by Sylvester Graham, who advocated whole grain vegetarian diet to promote chastity and curb lust. He preached that excess sexual desire caused disease and urged suppression of anything that might be interpreted as an expression of sexual desire. For example, he told mothers not to hug their little boys or show them any affection. Teenage boys were to sleep on hard beds so they wouldn't be coddled by too much comfort. Graham was followed by John Harvey Kellogg, who promoted high-fiber, vegetarian diet to combat the twin evils of constipation and natural urges. He preached against sexual activity, even in marriage. At his famous health clinic, he was fixated on bowel movements, claiming that 2 or 3 per day was normal, and he bragged that his bowel movements smelled like biscuits. So gross. Anyway, these two men were nutcases, all right? Today, we have gone through the sexual revolution. We understand that when you suppress natural urges and teach people to feel guilty about them, they reappear in pathological ways. So we have thrown off sexual prudishness, but the dietary strictures of Graham and Kellogg are still with us, now enshrined as national policy. And we are teaching children from very young age that it is bad to eat animal fats, with the predictable result, eating disorders. Many people have told us that they actually feel guilty eating butter. Not me. It's a huge part of my diet every day. A recent study found that vegetarians had more cancer, more allergies, more mental illness, and tooth decay than meat eaters, and they needed more health care and had poorer quality of life. That's sourced on the slide. Anyway, I'm going to point you to the slide so you can find all the sources. They're all sourced on the slide. Okay, well, what about claims of success by writers promoting vegetarianism? As you can see, these writers also forbid processed foods, especially vegetable oils and sugar. If you get off all of those at the same time as you give up animal foods, you're bound to feel better, at least for a short period of time, and as we saw, maybe upwards of 10 years. But eventually, the nutritional deficiencies will begin to appear. The studies these writers refer are invariably very short term, with many dropouts, and also vegans are much less likely to drink and smoke than meat eaters. All right, people try to consume a virtuous, low-fat, low-salt, high-fiber diet, but this is impossible to do for any length of time unless you have superhuman willpower. And if you do, you're probably not a very nice person to be around. So they end up binging and splurging on what I call the pornographic foods. Why not just consume a good, wholesome, rich diet with natural, traditional foods? Why not nourish your worthy self and your magnificent body temple by eating the foods that it requires? None of these are on that list, guys. Isn't it better to eat butter throughout the day than pig out on half a gallon of ice cream in the evening when you can't stand your low-fat diet any longer? Make no mistake, the paleo diet is another form of food puritanism. Lean meat, no salt, no dairy, no grains. They actually allow for 20% of the diet to be anything you want to eat, which of course ends up being mostly the pornographic foods you shouldn't be eating. All right, Weston A. Price Foundation's diet isn't neither puritanical nor pornographic, but is based on good, wholesome, satisfying foods. It's a diet that allows fat, meats, sauces, salt, grains, pickles, and even delicious whole food alternatives to all the junk food on the market. It's an unending mountain of junk food that's in the market today. The only difference between eating these delicious, satisfying foods today and eating them in the past is that today we have to be much more careful about where our food comes from because everything has been poisoned. Plant foods, animal foods, you name it, it's poisoned. So you have to learn how to source quality food that will lower that toxic exposure and your toxic load. Okay, the third principle. The third underlining characteristic of healthy traditional diet concerns the high levels of nutrients in the food. Again, going back to quality. This is the most important slide of this collection and represents the crux of Dr. Price's research, so pay attention. 2 words can sum up Dr. Price's findings: nutrient dense. Okay? Dr. Price analyzed the foods of healthy primitive people in his laboratory, and he found that the traditional diets contained a very high level of minerals, at least 4 times the calcium and other minerals compared to American diet of his day. This is why organic, pasture-based farming is so important. That is, farming that puts an emphasis on putting nutrients back into the soil. Regenerative farming, guys. If the minerals are not in the soil, they will not be in our food. That is one reason seafood are so important, because they will contain all the minerals that are in the sea. In addition, primitive peoples prepared their foods so as to make the minerals more available to assimilate in our bodies. By contrast, everything we are doing in the West, starting with the way we grow our food and ending with the way we prepare them, minimize the nutrients in our food and reduces the bioavailability. The most surprising finding of Dr. Price was the very high levels of fat-soluble vitamins in the diets of the healthy primitive people. These diets contained 10 or more times the level of vitamin A and vitamin D than the American diet of his day. Today, there would be an even greater disparity as Americans avoid the foods that contain these important vitamins, nutrients. Dr. Price looked at 3 fat-soluble vitamins, and we will start the first 2, A and D. These are the sources of vitamins A and D: fish eggs, fish liver, and fish liver oils, such as cod liver oil. But this isn't the rancid crap you buy on the grocery store shelves. You need to find like cold pressed, Rosetta? I can't remember the brand. But anyway, again, source quality, or you're just getting rancid oils that are going to hurt you in the end. So fish, shellfish, oily fish, sea mammals, such as the seal. For example, fish eggs are extremely high in vitamin D. In a lab test carried out by the Weston A. Price Foundation, we found 17,000 international units per tablespoon, according to Weston A. Price. Fish heads and sea oil are exceptionally high in vitamin A. Now, from land animals, good sources of vitamin A and D include liver and other organ meats, butter and cream, grass-fed, guys, the fat of birds, such as ducks and geese, and the fat of monogastric animals. Monogastric means they have one stomach, such as a bear or a pig, guinea pigs, cows, guinea pig. Cows, sheep, and goats are polygastric animals, having more than one stomach. They store vitamin A and D in their organ meats and milk, but not in their body fat. Okay? So the important point of this is that vitamin A and D will not be in egg yolks, butter, cream, organ meats, and fat of birds and pigs unless these animals are on pasture in the sunlight and eating green grass. So that is why there's so much emphasis on pasture-raised, grass-fed, etc. As soon as animals are put in confinement and given hay and dry feed and grains, that vitamin A and D are greatly reduced from the butterfat, and the levels begin to decline in the organ meats and even in the eggs. So, what do you notice about the list? These foods are all animal foods, and all the high-fat, high cholesterol foods that our establishment nutritionists tell us not to eat. Traditional cultures valued most the very foods that we're afraid of today. We are not to eat butter and cream because they contain saturated fat. Oh, don't eat eggs because they're full of cholesterol, right? These are lies, deceptions. We're told that liver will poison us and that the fatty meats will carry us to an early grave. The latest victim of demonization is seafood, which many people avoid due to the mercury scare. But there has always been mercury in the sea, and the chief source is volcanoes. And there is one specific component of a healthy diet that is highly protective against mercury. We'll talk about this later. So the take-home message is that to be healthy, you need to eat meat, as many of the foods on the list as possible. Many of these foods were sacred foods in these traditional cultures, given to pregnant women, the nursing women, and the growing children. But if you're pregnant today, doctors will advise you not to eat liver because it contains vitamin A, which they say is toxic. Just a few decades ago, pregnant women were routinely advised to take cod liver oil and eat liver a couple of times a week. And our doctors today are telling mothers that children above the age of 2 should be put on low-fat diets, thus depriving them of the most critical nutrients they need to grow up healthy, strong, and smart, especially as their brain is developing rapidly. You need those fats, the cholesterol, for the brain. Come on. Eggs from pastured chickens contain vitamin A and D. Eggs are a sacred food in China. A nursing or pregnant woman in China will eat up to 10 eggs per day if she can afford them. The Chinese recognize that eggs are a brain food, ensuring that a child will be very intelligent if he or she gets the nutrients through her mother's prenatal diet or through her mother's milk. Bear fat was a very important food among the Native Americans. If any couple could not get pregnant, they went on a bear fat diet for about a month and ate nothing but bear fat, and it always worked. Any couple trying to get pregnant today should go on the equivalent of a bear fat diet, eating lots of foods in the list you see here, before they spend any money on fertility treatments. Dr. Price referred to vitamin A and D as activators because they are necessary for mineral metabolism. You cannot absorb minerals without these vitamins. You may be drinking mineral drinks and green drinks and taking mineral supplements and eating organic mineral-rich foods, but you cannot absorb those minerals without the special activating substances, vitamin A and vitamin D. According to Dr. Price, this is where the greatest breakdown of the modern diet takes place. It is possible to starve for minerals abundant in the foods you eat, he said, because they cannot be utilized without the adequate quantities of the fat-soluble activators. This is why you need to put butter on your vegetables and cream in your soup. There's a reason most food tastes so much better with butter and cream, because butter and cream ensure that the nutrients are absorbed. We need the dietary equivalent of bricks and mortar to build strong bodies. Remember, that divine blueprint can only be built out with the right materials. The minerals are the bricks and the fat-soluble vitamins are the mortar. Bricks alone or mortar alone will not build a healthy body that you need. You need the complete picture. Okay. Unfortunately, the public has been given a lot of misinformation about vitamin A. If you look on a can of tomatoes, the label will say that tomatoes contain a certain amount of vitamin A. I have a collection of books on nutrition that tell you to get lots of vitamin A by eating carrots, right? Green vegetables. They are all together on what I call the shelf of shame. However, when you look up vitamin A in the biochemistry textbook or in the Merck manual, you will learn that there is no vitamin A in plant foods. It occurs only in animal foods. Plant foods contain the precursor to vitamin A, which are called carotenes, like beta-carotene. Our government allows the food industry to call the carotenes in plant food vitamin A, because otherwise it would be obvious that the food pyramid diet contains no vitamin A. So, carotenes are converted into the true vitamin A in the intestines of animals, including humans. The carotenes with the highest conversion factor, that is, the keratin that is most easily converted, is beta-carotene, pictured here. Various enzymes and vitamins are needed to split beta-carotene into a molecule of true vitamin A. Now get this. It takes at least 6 molecules of keratin to produce 1 molecule of vitamin A. So in some studies, researchers found a conversion factor of 48. Okay? 48 beta-carotene molecules to make one molecule of vitamin A. That's a lot of carrots, guys. A recent study out of the UK found that 47% of women are genetically unable to even make that conversion at all. So vitamin A is stored in the liver. So once again, some people can go for a certain amount of time without animals before a serious problem shows up. Once those problems start up, you better dive into animal foods and liver. But to prevent those from even getting there, include those in your diet. All right, conversion problems. The body requires many nutrients in order to convert keratins into vitamin A. First of all, you need fats in the diet because this conversion takes place in the presence of bile, which is produced by the liver and stored in your gallbladder, right? If you don't eat fat, you don't secrete bile. So you may eat a whole bunch of carrots, but unless you have some fat with them, you are not going to convert them into vitamin A. Again, that's why we put butter on our carrots or cream in our carrot soup or carrot juice. Make sure it's raw, organic. Carrots also taste a lot better that way. All right, you need enzymes to make the conversion. Okay, so you need fats and you need enzymes, many of which are still unknown. You also need thyroid hormones and vitamin E. This is a very difficult process, this conversion, one that is not very well understood. One of the great services that animals like cows perform for us is to convert that keratin that's in grass, which humans cannot digest, and put them into a butter fat that they produce or store in their livers. So eating calf liver, eating grass-fed butters, right? When we eat these foods, we should be very thankful for this step up, the conversion that the animal has done for us. While some humans can convert some of the keratins in their food into vitamin A, many conditions interfere with this conversion, and babies and children do not make this conversion at all. You can give the baby carrot juice until he turns orange. He's not going to have, and he will turn orange, but he's not going to make that conversion. This is why babies and growing children right up to age 8 need more vitamin A in their diet as a function of body weight than adults do. So plenty of eggs and butter and cream in their diet, right? Books on infant feeding back in the 1930s and 40s recommended 2 tablespoons of cod liver oil per day for infants over 3 months old. You also want to make sure that babies are getting lots of vitamin A rich foods such as pureed liver, egg yolks, and butter. Diabetics represent another group that cannot convert keratins in plant foods into vitamin A. Diabetes is much more than just a disease of sugar metabolism. It is a disease in which the pancreas is unable to produce a lot of important enzymes. A diabetic does not make this conversion. Yet what type of diet do we put diabetics on in this country? High carb, low fat diet. This is the worst kind of diet for a diabetic. Diabetics need fats to stabilize their blood sugar. And they also need a lot more vitamin A than most of us do. Even diabetics who need to take insulin can prevent most or all of the symptoms and terrible side effects of diabetes by taking cod liver oil and consuming high-fat foods rich in vitamin A. The side effects of diabetes are retina problems, kidney problems, healing problems, all signs of vitamin A deficiency. Individuals with poor thyroid function do not make this conversion. And thanks to the toxicity of today, that's almost everybody, guys. That is a large portion of the adult population in the U.S. Thyroid problems are very common here. And there are other conditions that will interfere with these conversions, including the consumption of too much keratin. When you flood the bloodstream with keratins, the conversion mechanism completely shuts down. Pesticides and chemicals interfere with vitamin A conversion, and that is their main vector of toxicity. If you work in a hair salon, a print shop, cleaners, or you're exposed to a lot of chemicals, which we all are, you need vitamin A to protect yourself. And if the wind blows, which it does, these pesticides from your neighbor's farms onto your farm, be sure to take extra cod liver oil. Let's assume you are one of those rare people who's efficient converter of keratin to vitamin A. You would need to eat carrots and broccoli all day long to obtain adequate amounts of vitamin A. And these conversion processes will consume an enormous amount of nutrients and energy that could be used for making the world a better place. Animals gladly provide us with vitamin A that we need so that we properly are nourished and have the energy and the good health to enlarge the borders of God's kingdom. This is why we consume animal products with humility and gratitude. Vitamin A is crucial for numerous processes in the body. You need vitamin A for protein assimilation. What happens when you consume lean meat, skinless chicken breast, egg whites without the yolks, skim milk, or protein powders? There's no fat. There's no vitamin A. So your body goes to the liver to get the vitamin A stored up there, and pretty soon you're depleted. You run out of your vitamin A. A high protein, low fat diet is the quickest way to become depleted of vitamin A. And that's when you start to see these strange autoimmune diseases and chronic fatigue, the kind of problems that the medical professionals just do not know what to do about. Remember that the traditional cultures never ate lean meat, always fatty. All right, it's not hard to get adequate protein in the Western diet. You do need some good quality animal protein. That's the easy part, especially in the West where we are not lacking of protein. What we lack are fat-soluble activators. So there's no need to overload on protein by taking a protein powder, for example, and it is very dangerous to eat low-fat foods. Traditional cultures understand this instinctively. They never ate lean meat, never. Vitamin A is also needed for mineral metabolism, for calcium assimilation in particular. When you consume skim milk, your body cannot use the calcium effectively and may end up putting it in the arteries, the kidneys, or joints where it does not belong, leading to heart attacks, right? Remember what makes arteries hard in atherosclerosis. It's not cholesterol, it's the calcium. Calcium that has built up in the wrong places because we're removing the fat. Vitamin A is critical for fetal development. The embryo begins as a collection of stem cells. After conception, the stem cells begin to get signals to become differentiating cells of various organs, starting with the heart, which start to form on day 6. The stem cells then get signals to become bone cells or pancreas cells, skin cells, etc. What gives the signal to the stem cell? You guessed it, it's vitamin A. The heart in the fetus begins to form many days before the woman knows she is pregnant. If she has good vitamin A stores, the heart will form properly. If she's depleted of vitamin A, she has not prepared for pregnancy with nutrient-dense foods. The heart will not form properly or not at all, and there will be a miscarriage. So we see the wisdom of traditional people with their periods of special feeding before conception. Iron deficiency, anemia, is very common in third world, even though they have a lot of iron in their foods. Often the people are very poor and cannot afford any animal foods. The way to treat anemia is not by giving more iron, but by giving vitamin A, preferably from cod liver oil. And that cures the anemia because the vitamin A, the iron, can be absorbed, right? Or liver. The entire endocrine system is dependent on vitamin A, particularly the thyroid. Okay? The thyroid needs more vitamin A than any other organ in the body except the eyeballs. The retina, right? Retina. The eyes are absolutely dependent on vitamin A. Vitamin A deficiency can lead to blindness. The immune system also cannot function without vitamin A. We cannot make stress hormones or sex hormones without vitamin A. It is also necessary for healthy eyes, skins, and bones. All right, cholesterol. The left-hand side of this chart shows the conversion of cholesterol into all sex hormones. That's right, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all of them are made from cholesterol, and vitamin A is needed to make that conversion. Vitamin A is needed to make that conversion. We often see dramatic improvements in hormonal problems like fibroids, endometriosis, difficult menstrual cycles, and even infertility with high dose of cod liver oil or calf liver things like that. This right-hand side of the chart shows the conversion of cholesterol into all the adrenal cortex hormones. These hormones regulate mineral metabolism, blood pressure, glucose levels in the body. Cortisol is the hormone that the body uses for healing and dealing with stress, our stress hormones, right? It's what I call the chill out hormone. An important point is that vitamin A found in foods like butter, cod liver, grass-fed guys, butter, cod liver oil, and liver, all the nutritious foods our government is telling us not to eat, is necessary for every step of these conversions. Vitamin A is very important when you're under a lot of stress or when you've injured yourself, because then your body can make these healing hormones. Your body can't make these healing hormones without it. Why do so many people need to take prednisone today? Because they are not making cortisol, the natural form of prednisone themselves. They do not have the raw materials. They do not have the vitamin A and the cholesterol to make their own stress hormones. Trans fats found in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils used in margarines, spreads, and most processed foods inhibit the enzymes that are needed to make the conversion. Mary Enig's thesis showed that the trans fats interfere with the cytochrome P450 family of enzymes, which the body uses to make all of these conversions. It's a very important enzyme pathway, P450. So when you're substituting margarine for butter and eating a lot of processed foods, you end up with all kinds of problems with stress, problems healing, inflammation, hormone production, reproduction, you name it. Dr. Hale from Texas carried out some interesting studies during the 1940s. He took normal pigs. During the pregnancy of the sows, he removed vitamin A from the diet. All the piglets were born blind, all of them, and with petrified optic nerves. Then he took the blind pigs, mated them. Some of those sows got pregnant. He then gave them cod liver oil, rich in vitamin A, and all the pigs were born with normal sight. Thus, this so-called genetic defect can be turned off and on, simply by adding or removing vitamin A from the diet. That's gene expression. That's epigenetics. Vitamin A stores are rapidly depleted under conditions of stress. Actually, when you have good nutritional status, including plentiful vitamin A, stress is exhilarating. The healthy individual thrives on stress. It is what gets us up in the morning. It is what makes life worth living. We'd be absolutely bored without stress and challenges. But when vitamin A is inadequate, when the diet is inadequate, the smallest little things can turn into stressful situations. Diet, guys, it's so important. Excess dietary protein uses up vitamin A very quickly. Again, these lean meats, isolated powders, blah. Yet, health officials advise us to eat lean meat, skinless chicken breast, egg whites without the yolk, and skim milk. And many health coaches recommend protein powders. Don't do it. Cold weather depletes vitamin A, as does fever and illness. The reason children with measles go blind is because the fever uses up their vitamin A. It's important for children to have a fever. A fever is what the body uses to get the immune system going. It is important to let your children have fever occasionally, but at the same time, you want to make sure they're getting their cod liver oil and foods containing high vitamin A, such as smoothies made with egg yolks and cream. Okay? Physical exertion uses up vitamin A. Athletes need extra amounts in their diet, but often don't get it, which explains why so many of them experience sudden burnout. And then, of course, toxins. Pesticides and other environmental toxins work by interfering with vitamin A pathways so that you're in a situation where you're exposed to a lot of toxins. You need to make sure your vitamin A intake is increased. And guys, that's just all of us today. We're all exposed to toxicity at very high levels. So make sure your diet is supporting you and protecting you. Vegetarians argue that we shouldn't eat animal foods because they contain dioxins. Well, actually, many plant foods contain dioxins as well. These toxins are everywhere, and it is inappropriate to single out animal foods as the only source. Vitamin A is highly protective against dioxins. So when we avoid animal foods, we are actually missing out on the factors that can neutralize dioxins. By the way, we have always had dioxins in the environment. Smoke is filled with dioxins. Think of the Gaelic Islanders we talked about in the last video, living in the smoke-filled cottages. Traditional cultures were exposed to a lot more smoke than modern people. Since dioxins have always been in our environment, the body has a whole system for taking care of them. And this system is dependent on vitamin A. All right, as with vitamin A, the public has been given a lot of misinformation about vitamin D, which is really a hormone, right? The establishment says all you need to do to obtain adequate vitamin D is to be in the sunlight for 10 minutes every day. While that is a good practice, that's not all you need to do. The statement is wrong. You can only make vitamin D when there is adequate amount of UVB light, which in most parts of the country only occurs during midday, right? Midsummer, midday. And you need to go out completely naked during the time for about half hour to get adequate amounts of vitamin D. Now, okay, let's keep going. There's nothing wrong with this practice, but it's highly impractical for most of us. And even traditional cultures spent midday in the shade. The fact is, all these traditional cultures had good sources of vitamin D in the diet, even those who lived in tropical regions. Now, that all being said, I'm going to say get out and get some sunlight. There are so many rays that our body uses in so many different ways. The sun is one of the most healing parts of our universe, and you need to get a dang good amount of sunlight every single day. And it goes way beyond vitamin D. Okay, the other vitamin D myth is that you can't get vitamin D from food, that you have to add it to milk or take a vitamin D pill. But traditional people had a lot of food sources of vitamin D, and only these foods are the very only these foods are the very foods we're told to avoid, right? Fish liver oils, fish eggs, shellfish, oily fish, insects, butter, egg yolks, organ meats, fat of the birds, and even pig's blood. All right, vitamin D, just like vitamin A, is needed for mineral metabolism and is involved in many processes: bone health, immune health, nervous system, and reproduction. There are vitamin D receptors found in almost every cell in the body, and people that are paying attention have learned just how important it is, as you see that like 90% of the severe infections with the virus going around are vitamin D deficient. It's a big deal. The body needs vitamin D to make insulin. This is another reason animal foods, particularly cod liver oil, liver, are so important for diabetics. In a recent study from Scandinavia, one group of babies was given cod liver oil for the first year of life. A control group did not get the cod liver oil. Neither group was given dietary advice. The children were then followed into adulthood. Those who got the cod liver oil that first year were immune from diabetes. There was hardly a case in that group, while those who did not get cod liver oil developed diabetes at the same rate as the general population. Very interesting. The vegetarian type of vitamin D, which is vitamin D2, is difficult to absorb and more likely to cause a softening of the hard tissue and hardening of the soft tissue in the body. The dairy industry used to add D2 to milk, but quietly dropped that practice when they learned how toxic D2 is. Today, the animal form, vitamin D3, is added to milk. The industry needs to do this because the cows are no longer outside making vitamin D from the sunlight. They're raised in warehouses and factories. Unfortunately, D2 is still added to some foods, namely imitation milk made from soy, rice, almonds, oats, aimed to the vegetarian consumer. But even with D3, you're only getting one form of vitamin D, and there are over 1,000 forms of vitamin D. When you eat vitamin D-rich foods, you're getting all of them. We hear a lot about the presumed toxicity of vitamin A and vitamin D, so the Weston A. Price Foundation has explored this subject very carefully. And what we've discovered is that these two vitamins need to work together. Vitamin A without vitamin D can be toxic, and vitamin D without vitamin A can be toxic. This is why we should eat a variety of foods that supply these vitamins. It is important to take a brand of cod liver oil that has both vitamin A and vitamin D, with a good ratio of A to D. no more than 10 to 1. Consult the shopping guide put out by the Weston A. Price Foundation for recommended brands of cod liver oil or visit westonaprice.org for more information on this superfood. Okay. We have a lot of Africans in Washington, D.C. And you can always tell which people grew up in Africa because they have such beautiful teeth. This picture was taken in Angola. Notice the excellent bone structure and wide palate of these two individuals. All right. These two jars contain food that are very typical in the African diet. The one on the left is palm oil, which is solid at room temperature in our part of the world, but liquid in the tropics. Palm oil is used in cooking, for food storage, and as an addition to many dishes in Africa. This is one plant food that actually tests positive for vitamin D. This is because vitamin D will be formed in any oil exposed to the sun. The palm fruit sweats a little oil, and in the hot sun, vitamin D is formed. Palm oil is also extremely rich in keratins, and since the keratins are in an oil, they are likely to be easily converted to vitamin A. I suspect that people from Africa are relatively good converters of keratins to vitamin A. Now the jar on the right contains fermented shrimp paste. It is very salty and spicy, fishy in taste, definitely an acquired taste. The paste is made with dried shrimp, which are very rich in vitamin D. When I ask people from Africa what kind of food they ate, they always tell me about shrimp paste. It is eaten as a condiment, like ketchup. And all throughout Asia and Africa, you find shrimp used in these ways as a very nutrient-dense condiment eaten in small amounts. These photographs were taken in a general store in Zimbabwe. They show dried insects, a little dried fish. These are added to soups and stews, once again, may be the only animal foods in the diet. Yet, these animal foods are adequate to produce that beautiful bone structure and facial structure we see in peoples brought up on traditional diets in Africa. When the quality of animal food is very high and the foods are very rich in A and D, as are insects and whole fish, you actually do not need a lot of animal protein in your diet. In Japan, these little salted dried fish are a snack for children. These children carry these dried fish snacks to school and in special little cases. What a wonderful snack for children. In the U.S., we give children an imitation, something that is shaped like a fish, but made with white flour and partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. And yeah, that's, goldfish. Now, in the traditional American diet, why we had such good health in generations of the past, the chief source of vitamin A was dairy products, and they were raw milk, butter, cream, cheese, and eggs, from animals on pasture, grass-fed. Actually, the vitamin A in butter is the easiest to absorb of any food. These foods are also good sources of vitamin D. One interesting study found that unless the chickens are out in the bright sunlight, there will be no vitamin D in the egg yolks. So pasture raised is so important. Also, in the West, we traditionally ate liver once a week. Many Western cultures consume liver in the form of pate, scrapple, liverwurst, and sausage. These are ways of making offal taste good. We need to return to these foods and to this American diet. Until the late 1940s, most Americans took cod liver oil, and it was routinely given to growing children. Cod liver oil is such a rich source of vitamin A and D that it acts as an insurance policy for diets that will invariably contain some denatured and devitalized foods. Our mantra is cod liver oil plus butter from grass-fed cows. These two foods work synergistically and should be a part of everyone's diet, especially that of a growing child. Instead, we're told to eat skinless chicken breasts, which are dry and inedible, and practically devoid of vitamin A. Look how much richer the dark meat with skin is than skinless breast, and look at all the vitamin A in the liver. By the way, the amino acids in the chicken skin provide a perfect balance to the amino acids in the muscle meat. Skin and meat should always be eaten together. Rarely happens these days. And Americans traditionally cooked in lard, which is stable. It is a stable, healthy fat that's very rich in vitamin D. Like humans, pigs make vitamin D and store it in their fat. We need to use lard and fatty pork products from animals that have been raised on pasture and exposed to sunlight. Lard was the first fat in the American diet to be replaced by partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, specifically by Crisco and other vegetable shortenings made from partially hydrogenated cottonseed oil. They'll tell you it's heart healthy, and yet you'll die of a heart attack. In 1913, Procter & Gamble, the makers of Crisco, published a Crisco cookbook in which they claimed that women who used Crisco rather than lard were more modern, more enlightened, and had cleaner houses and children of better character than women who used lard. Oh my gosh, the industry has created the impression that it is somehow vulgar to eat lard. Check out this old advertisement. For lard, lard always gets a lot of laughs, but it's true. Lard is a good source of vitamin D, which is very important for mental health. The question needs to ask, which fat, Crisco or lard, will produce children of better character? I think we know. Our lard bumper sticker, available from the Weston A Price Foundation. Read the center carefully. It says, "We battle for the Salvation Army." Lard. There is a third fat-soluble vitamin that Dr. Price described, which we call Activator X, or the Price factor. Activator X is a more potent catalyst for vitamin and mineral absorption than vitamin A and D. It is found in sacred foods, particularly seafoods, organ meats, and the butter of cows eating very rapidly growing grass in the spring and fall. There are 2 times during the year when the grass is very lush and grows fast, and that is when the cows produce the X factor. The principle seems to be that animals transform some unknown factor in green growing plants, grass or plankton, into the X factor and store it in their fat. So make sure that you're sourcing grass-fed, and even if you can find like local farmers and time to buy up, when those 2 times of the years come by, you're going to be getting a healthy amount of these X factors in those sources. So recently we figured out that the activator X is actually vitamin K2, the animal form of vitamin K, which animals make out of vitamin K1 in green growing plants. Vitamin K2 plays an important role in the growth of the skeletal structure. A sign of deficiency is underdevelopment of the middle of the third of the face, a sunken-in look around the cheekbones and the nose. Vitamin K2 is needed for deposition of phosphorus and calcium in the bones and teeth. When you have a lot of vitamin K2 in your saliva, you don't get cavities. Recent research shows that vitamin K2 prevents calcification and inflammation of the arteries, and Dutch researchers are predicting that within 22 years we will define heart disease as a deficiency in vitamin K2. Ironic, because the sources of vitamin K2 are the foods accused of causing heart disease. Right? They're trying to kill us all by their recommendations. Finally, vitamin K2 is involved in the synthesis of the myelin and supports learning capacity. It is also vital to reproduction. Vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K2. They all work together. Vitamins A and D tell cells to make certain proteins, and vitamin K2 activates these proteins after the signaling. Taking any of these vitamins alone will rapidly cause deficiency in the other 2. We need to get these vitamins together in nutrient-dense animal foods and fats. You will find balance in nature, okay? You have to make sure you're getting these natural forms. Vitamin K2 helps children grow tall. by preventing the closure of the growth plates at the end of the long bones prematurely. There is also a growth plate on either side of the maxilla. We theorize that vitamin K can prevent the closure of these platelets of this plate until adulthood so that the facial bone grows wide. Once again, the best source of vitamin K are mostly the sacred foods. The vitamin is created by fermentation, so you also find it in fermented foods such as natto, the fermented soybean paste, as well as sauerkraut, which is a phenomenal source of many vitamins and nutrients. Again, the best sources of this vital nutrient are animal foods like poultry liver, aged cheeses. And by the way, we tested bear fat and it was off the charts. Bear fat was a sacred food among the American Indians, considered very important for reproduction, as well as emu oil can be another rich source. So, make sure you're paying attention to those sources and getting them daily. All right, this was one of Price's favorite photos. This lovely Peruvian girl with her round face lived high up in the Andes Mountains at 12,000 feet. She's holding some dried fish roe. He found that these cultures valued dried fish eggs, which they carried from seashore to high altitudes in their backpacks. He asked the people why they went to such trouble to bring fish eggs high up in the mountains. The answer? We need these fish eggs so we can have healthy babies. It was the same reply he got in Alaska from the Eskimos when he asked them about the salmon roe. Indigenous people knew instinctively what science has taught us. Fish eggs contain many nutrients necessary for optimum reproduction, including vitamins A, D, K2, and minerals like zinc and iodine, and certain fats called DHA and EPA, which are important for normal reproduction, especially the development of the brain and the nervous system in babies. According to Dr. Price, fish roe is also an excellent source of the X factor. So, how did they know? How did populations separated by thousands of miles know that consumption of fish eggs ensured healthy babies? Dr. Price was in awe at the instinctual wisdom of so-called primitive people throughout the world. We do not have any answer to the question of how they knew. We've lost that instinctual knowledge. We need science to get us back to where these people were. Our mission statement at Weston A. Price Foundation is the scientific validation of these traditional foodways. Unfortunately, science has been perverted. It has been bought up by the food industry and is not being used to validate the ways of nature. We know this. Dr. Price gave a combination of high vitamin cod liver oil and high vitamin butter oil as a very successful treatment for tooth decay, growth problems in children, arthritis, and many other conditions. In fact, he brought several people, including his own nephew, back from the brink of death just by placing alternating drops of cod liver oil and butter oil under the tongue. He found that they were synergistic. Neither one worked very well on its own, but they had a powerful effect when combined and put together. When he started the foundation, neither of these products was available. We read about high vitamin butter oil in Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, but we did not know what he meant by high vitamin cod liver oil. Then a farmer in Nebraska figured out how to make the butter oil using a low temperature centrifuge process. The same farmer figured out how to make a high vitamin cod liver oil through a low temperature fermentation process. This cod liver oil has doubled the levels of A and D compared to the conventional brands, all of which come from Scandinavia and are highly processed. We have had excellent feedback on this combination, including teeth that have remineralized, arthritis clearing up, and the digestive problems resolving. This combination should be used for any health recovery program. A good maintenance dose of cod liver oil for adults is 10,000 IUs per day, provided by 2 teaspoons of regular cod liver oil or 1 teaspoon high vitamin cod liver oil, which also provides about 1,000 IUs of vitamin D. Those recovering from illness or surgery exposed to environmental toxins are under a lot of stress, can take higher amounts, even up to 90,000 IUs per day for a short period of time. We have heard of miracle cures using high doses of cod liver oil. Babies after weaning and children should receive 5,000 IUs of vitamin A per day from cod liver oil. It can be given with an eyedropper or mixed with water or a small amount of fresh orange juice. Cod liver oil works synergistically with saturated fat. The best combination is cod liver oil in a diet containing butter from grass-fed cows. Those suffering from arthritis, bone problems, digestive disorders, cancer, fatigue, or recovering from chemotherapy or surgery should take 1.5 teaspoons high vitamin butter oil in addition to cod liver oil. High vitamin butter oil is also recommended for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Taking cod liver oil. So how do you take this awful stuff? Never on a spoon. Better to mix it with a little water or fresh juice or cream and then swallow quickly, bypassing the taste buds as much as possible. Note that prior to 1950, the recommendation for babies 3 months and older was 2 teaspoons of cod liver oil a day. Cod liver oil contains vitamin A and D, a highly unsaturated omega-3 fatty acid, EPA and DHA. It needs to be balanced in the diet with food containing vitamin K, saturated fats, and omega-6 arachidonic acid. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. You give cod liver oil to children. Just, put it in a syringe. They actually really love it. It's better to get those practices down while they're young so that it's easy as they get older. Here's a few ads for cod liver oil from the yesteryear. Translation from French, guaranteed to be natural without any preparation, without any mixture. Just pure cod liver oil. An ad from 1946. The Ministry of Food in the United Kingdom had a public ad campaign for cod liver oil to make sure you're having healthy babies. Ads from the States. A well-shaped head, a fine, full chest, a strong back, straight legs, sound, even teeth. Give your baby the help it needs to build them. And goes on to explain that daily use is important. Cod liver oil was given to protect children against the measles and other infectious diseases, but people also recognize its role in supporting optimal growth and development. This ad is from 1932. He used to get honor grades at school. He used to be a leader, out of doors with his gang. At home, he was always happy, sunny, active. But something's happened to him, something that you could have prevented and that should correct immediately. Now his school grades are barely passing. He tires too easily to enjoy strenuous outdoor play. In short, he's not his old self, and you're worried. This change in your little boy is no fault of his. His growing young body is crying aloud for essentials in which his diet is deficient, vitamins that are necessary for correct development and mental alertness. You can help him get some of these essentials easily and surely with the aid of Scott's Emulsion of cod liver oil. This famous product for 60 years has supplied children with the purest Norwegian cod liver oil. They need this for its wealth in vitamins A and D, the former for correct growth and resistance to common childhood diseases, the latter for the development of strong bones and teeth. We had so much wisdom in the past. Cod liver oil was given as a nationwide public health campaign. Cadets receiving cod liver oil and milk, and in 1933, that would have been raw milk. The brain is an organ of the body and needs to be nourished, just like all the other organs in the body. Foods that nourish the brain are the same nutrient-dense sacred foods so highly prized by primitive people. Choline is particularly important. The body goes through the window of opportunity when the brain makes connections. And this cannot happen without adequate choline after this window has passed. The connection can't be made. This is one reason we recommend liver and egg yolks as baby's first foods. So many people today on low-fat diets or on the standard American diet have starving brains.